අද්විතීය 200 Mbps ස්පීඩ් එකකින් ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ වේගවත්ම සහ පුළුල්තම හෝම් බ්‍රෝඩ්බෑන්ඩ් සම්බන්ධතාවය වන SLT මොබිටෙල් දේශීය ෆයිබර් බලවේගය ඔබත් අදම අත්විඳින්න.
හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9, this Wednesday the 28th of June 2023. Approved. Cabinet greenlights the domestic debt restructuring proposal. Committee on Public Finance to hold discussions with stakeholders involved, both tomorrow and the day after. Sustainable. Domestic debt restructuring benefits both the government and the public, says the central bank governor.
Once strategy is approved by the parliament, then we will see that would be a win-win solution for everyone.
Says that the policy measures during crisis did not collapse the country's economic growth.
We prevented the further collapse of the economy and minimize the contraction.
Cooperation. Minister of Foreign Affairs highlights the need for a credit collaboration to create a common template in aid of crisis-hit countries. Export performance. Merchandise export earnings surpassed the $4 billion mark during the first 5 months of the year.
Alliance Finance මෙතුරු රන්නයි සේවාවෙන් රන් පවුම්කට රුපියල් 1,70,000ක ඉහළ අධිකාරම.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දිනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟම ඇති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Shanella Fernando in your top stories for tonight. The Cabinet approved the domestic debt restructuring proposal presented by the Ministry of Finance today. The domestic debt restructuring proposal will be discussed at the Committee on Public Finance tomorrow and the day after with the stakeholders involved. Furthermore, the Parliament will take up the proposal for debate during the weekend.
A special cabinet meeting was held this afternoon on the domestic debt restructuring strategy of the government. President's Media Division announced that the program proposed by the Ministry of Finance was unanimously approved at the meeting. The PMD said that all parliamentarians of the government were notified at the Presidential Secretariat on the developments and decisions pertaining to the domestic debt restructuring strategy. The proposal will be taken into discussion at the Committee on Public Finance under the chairmanship of Dr. Harsha De Silva.
හෙට 29 වෙනිදා හැන්දෑවේ මුදල් පිළිබඳ කාරක සභාවට අපි කැඳවලා තියෙනවා මහ බැංකුව මුදල් මණ්ඩලය සහ භාණ්ඩාගාරය ඒත් සමගම නීතිපතිතුමා විගණකාධිපතිතුමා ඊට පස්සේ ඒ සෙෂන් එක ඉවර වුණාම කැඳවලා තියෙනවා සියලුම ප්‍රධාන බැංකුවල ප්‍රධානීන් සහ අර්ථසාධක අරමුදල සේවා නියුක්තික අරමුදල ETF එක ඉන්ෂුරන්ස් කෝපරේෂන් එක දේශීය ණය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීමට අදාළ සියලු පාර්ශව ඊට පස්සේ නැවතත් 30 වෙනිදා මේ කණ්ඩායම් දෙකම නැවත කැඳවලා තියෙනවා තියෙන ගැටලු සම්බන්ධයෙන් යම්කිසි ස්ථාවරයකට එන්න අපිට පුළුවන් වේද කියලා බලන්න. අපි විශ්වාස කරනවා දේශීය ණය හරියට ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කරගන්න පුළුවන් වුණොත් පොලි අනුපාතය අඩු වෙනවා. සමස්ත සුළු හා මධ්‍යම ව්‍යවසායකයන්ට ඒකෙන් ශක්තියක් ලැබෙනවා. මේ සියලු දේ තීරණය වෙන්නේ කෙසේ වෙතත් රජය ඉදිරිපත් කරන යෝජනාවලිය ප්‍රකාරව.
During the weekend, the domestic debt restructuring strategy will be debated in Parliament to get the proposal passed. According to State Minister of Finance Ranjit Siamalapitiya, local debt restructuring will be implemented for $41 billion worth of domestic debt. It includes $25 billion worth of treasury bonds, $11 billion worth of treasury bills, and $5.6 billion worth of development bonds. According to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, this process also aims for manageable levels of cross-financing needs, manageable levels of debt services denominated in domestic and foreign currency, and a decline in debt to gross domestic product ratio to manageable levels in the medium to long run.
Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe once again assured that domestic debt restructuring will not impact public deposits in banks. Addressing the National Industry Seminar 2023, he said that the approval of the domestic debt restructuring strategy by Parliament will be a win-win situation for both the government and the members of the public. Further, the central bank governor predicted that the inflation rate, which is still in double digits, will reduce to single digit by the end of July this year.
The National Industry Seminar 2023, organised by the Industrial Development Board and the Ministry of Industries, was held in Colombo this morning under the patronage of Minister of Industries Dr. Ramesh Pathirana.
Sri Lankan entrepreneurs and the manufacturers wanted to ensure that they have more linkage towards the global markets, which we have discussed with the Foreign Minister and also with the Minister of Tourism. And we are working on a particular strategy to link our produce to the global markets, initially to the emerging markets in Africa. So with the collaboration of IDB, they will liaise with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We will try and take a delegation from Sri Lankan manufacturers to the African markets to ensure that we enter and also develop in such emerging markets in the long run. We will possibly get a moratorium for the debt repayment amounting up to $17 billion. Perhaps we'll get a good 4 to 5 years down the line for the repayment moratorium. So during that time, we have our chances to ensure to strengthen the Sri Lankan rupee and also to produce more and export more. When it comes to the globalization, we have to ensure that we have to enter into certain free trade agreements. We have two world largest economies at our door front. China's economy is predicted to be the largest economy in the world in 2 decades down the line. And India's economy is predicted to be the second largest economy in the world, perhaps 2 to 3 decades down the line. So whatever we produce in this country, whatever that is value added in this country, we'll surely find a market in India and China. And there's no doubt that the Sri Lankan economy, Sri Lankan entrepreneurship, industrialists would prosper in time to come.
One thing I can assure from the central bank point of view, that the banking system stability and the protection of the deposits of all of yours and all public deposits in the banking system would not be affected. Once strategy is approved by the Parliament, then we will see that would be a win-win solution for everyone who will be making fair solution, fair contribution, and also while seeking huge contribution from the external creditors who have given us credit, and $17 billion relief in terms of foreign currency debt service payments from external creditors. That what we are seeking is a significant achievement so that we can restore the sustainability of the government. When I hear some commentators, people are saying we contracted the economy, as our policy is in fact the other side. We prevented the further collapse of the economy and minimize the contraction, limit that to 7.8% compared to economy was going to collapse and crash if we did not take those actions. This year we are trying to minimize further, trying to revive economy at least compared to last year 8%, maybe 0 or small negative this year overall, because we see first quarter already has 11.5% contraction as a result of this crisis. And also in terms of inflation, we all know it was going to be 100% or even higher, all the predictions, but we were able to minimize the inflation at around 70% peak, and now we are going to see single digit inflation by end of July. And with that, all interest rates will also be coming down. So that is the important achievement in a country which has been going through very difficult times. If you compare a lot of countries that has been going through this kind of crisis, I think we have been able to recover relatively fast time, and also we have been able to reach targets of whatever debt restructuring IMF program within a relatively short period of time.
The Sri Lanka Banks Association welcomed the assurance provided by the Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, that financial sector stability will be maintained. The association also appreciated the clarifications provided by the Governor on the relevant process. In a statement, the association meanwhile highlighted that the key aim in assisting in maintaining and developing a sound banking structure in Sri Lanka in accordance with policy and regulatory frameworks set by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
Issuing a statement, the Sri Lanka Banks Association noted that the central bank governor's public announcement covered important issues and included a categoric assurance that the forthcoming domestic debt restructuring will not impact financial system stability and will not in any way adversely affect depositors in banks or non-bank financial institutions. The statement read that the governor had also clarified that the 5-day holiday for the banking sector was to afford a sufficient period of days for discussion on the debt restructuring strategy within the government. The statement went on to say that the holiday also provides an opportunity for reflection by the public and market participants. The association also welcomed the governor's statement that the debt restructuring strategy has to be announced and must follow the proper approval process from the Cabinet of Ministers, Committee of Public Finance and the Parliament via a debate, apart from having been discussed with the Central Bank and Ministry of Finance. It also went on to note that during the 5-day holiday, banking services will be available for customers as usual via ATMs, online and other digital channels, while pointing out that capital and liquidity ratios of banks remain above the regulatory requirements and banks pay close attention to these indicators. The statement added that the SLBA represents all licensed banks in Sri Lanka and encourages cooperation among members and coordination of banking sector operations as required. It was further highlighted that the key aim during this ambit is assisting in maintaining and developing a sound banking structure in Sri Lanka in accordance with policy and regulatory frameworks set by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ali Sabri, says that a common template created in collaboration with all the creditors, including China, is essential for crisis-hit nations, including Sri Lanka. Addressing the World Economic Forum, the Foreign Minister said steps are underway to address corruption, including the introduction of an anti-corruption bill and a central bank bill.
How do you see this moving forward in terms of China's role?
I think this is very, very important because we need to understand by today, unlike 10, 15 years ago, 60% of this development finance and the debt comes from non-Paris Club and non-London Club members. So there is a new emerging creditors coming in. China is leading it, and so is the private creditors. So we need to have a ready-made template so that you could quickly do it. Because in Sri Lanka's case, for example, we were under stress for about 10 months until the first tranche came in. From last April, we started the negotiation. I was the finance minister then. I started negotiating with the IMF. We entered into the staff level agreement in September. But since then, it took us almost 8 months toward the end of March for us to get the assurances from the creditors from all over in order to get the first tranche of the payment. By that time, countries are under real stress and countries could fall apart. So it's important that something ready-made has to be there. So therefore, it's important that both China, the Paris Club, non-bilateral creditors like the private creditors, bondholders, all sit together and agree on a template. And number one. Number two is also it is time, for example, in Sri Lanka's case, we quickly applied and asked for a reverse graduation because we were not having access to low interest funding from these multilaterals. So we in fact spoke to the World Bank and to the ADB, reverse graduated so that we have access to funding.
How are you going to address corruption in Sri Lanka?
Right now we are coming out with a new architecture in Hong Kong style, like the anti-corruption law, which is in the parliament. And we have also learned from the past, though the law had been there, implementation had been bad because most of the time by law, you had to appoint retired judges of Supreme Court. They are 65 years old. So by the time they come into the place, they have lost steam in their life. So we are looking at all those things and learning from the past, and it has to be done. And other most important thing is we are working with the IMF, and they have wanted autonomy to the central bank. A new central bank law is coming in, and then there is fiscal responsibility law which is also coming in. And digitalization is one way of trying to prevent human touch as much as possible. But I can say, though it is our desire to eliminate corruption, you can't do it overnight. It will take time. You know that if you are coming from Sri Lanka and in our region. But what we could do is to attack it and reduce it into a pragmatic level, and then over a period of time with the development in other countries like this, when there is more transparency, more accountability, more digital intervention and good laws and improvement on the judiciary, hopefully we will one day eliminate it.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa called on the president to address the nation and inform the public on how the debt restructuring strategy of the government will be implemented. He made these comments while addressing a public gathering in Polonnaruwa.
රටක් යම් කිසි තීන්දුවක් ගන්නවා නම් ඒ තීන්දුව කරුණු කාරණා පිළිබඳව රටේ ජනතාව දැනුවත් වෙන්නට ඕන. මම පිළිගන්නවා මේ කරුණු සංවේදී කරුණු. මේ කරුණු ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම තුළ සමහරෙක් තර්ක කරන්න පුළුවන් රටේ කලබගෑනියක් සිද්ධ වෙයි කියලා. හදිසි තත්ත්වයක් සිද්ධ වෙයි කියලා. අපේ රටේ ඉන්නේ බුද්ධිමත් ජනතාව. ඇත්ත කතා කරොත් ඒ වගේම වැඩපිළිවෙල හරියට ඉදිරිපත් කරොත් කොලේ හංගල වැඩ කරන්නේ නැතුව මං හිතනවා මේ රටේ ජනතාව කලබල වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මං රටේ ජනතාවගෙනුත් ඉල්ලීමක් කරනවා කලබල වෙන්න එපයි කියලා. හැබැයි කලබල නොවි විය හැකි දේ ගැන අපි බුද්ධිමත්ව හිතන්නට ඕන. රජය අපිවත් දැනුවත් කරලා නැහැ. මේ මොහොත වෙනකම් වහාම ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන පරිදි රටේ ජනාධිපතිවරයා ජාතිය අමතලා පැහැදිලි ප්‍රකාශයක් කරන්නට ඕන. දේශීය ණය ප්‍රතිව්‍යුහගත කිරීමක් සිදු කරනවද? එය සිදු කරනවා නම් මොකක්ද වෙන්නේ? ණය කපා හැරීමද? බැඳුම් කරවල කල්ලිකුත් වීමේ දිනය කල් දැමීමද? පොලිය කපා හැරීමද? ඒ තුනේම මිශ්‍රණයක්ද? ඒ මොනවා කරත්.
In a letter addressed to President Ranil Wickremesinghe, the Bar Association of Sri Lanka has urged to make the best possible appointment for the post of Inspector General of Police, as the public confidence in the police is vital for the administration of justice and the rule of law. As speculations are rife as to who the next IGP would be, the Bar Association of Sri Lanka has emphasized that it is of utmost importance that the next IGP is an officer whose service in the police force is exemplary and unblemished and able to restore public confidence in the Sri Lanka police. The association notes that the erosion of public confidence in the police boils down to lack of confidence, lack of independence rather, politicization, police brutality, custodial deaths and lack of professionalism. The BASL further mentioned that prior to granting approval to the appointment of the next IGP, the procedures to be followed with regard to recommendations or approvals for appointments under Article 4B or Article 41C of the Constitution should be determined by the Constitutional Council as provided for in Article 41E of the Constitution. Sri Lanka's merchandise export earnings take a dip, recording a decline of 8.29% compared to last year. Stay tuned as we uncover the factors behind this economic shift after this short commercial break.
ගොඩමඩ පෙරලි කරන බලපුළුවන්කාරයා මහින්ද්‍රා යුවෝ ඩීමෝ වෙතින්. වැඩම ගොඩයි ගොඩම තමයි ස්වරාජ් ට්‍රැක්ටර් ඩීමෝ වෙතින්.
In business news, Sri Lanka recorded $4.83 billion as merchandise export earnings during the period between January and May this year. This amount, however, is a 8.29% decline compared to the corresponding period of last year, which recorded $5.2 billion. According to the Export Development Board, the declining trend in merchandise exports are continuing due to the negative trends shown in major export products such as apparel and textiles, rubber and rubber finished products, and coconut-based products.
According to the statistics released by the Export Development Board, Sri Lanka's merchandise exports increased by 16.6% to $989.7 million in May this year compared to April 2023. However, this figure is a 5.59% reduction compared to May last year. Export earnings from tea, which made up 12% of merchandise exports, increased by 24.16% year-on-year to $116.33 million in May 2023 compared to May 2022. Export earnings from rubber and rubber finished products, meanwhile, increased by 0.2% year-on-year to $76.84 million in May 2023 due to the performances in the exports of pneumatic and retreated rubber tires and tubes. Spices and essential oils export earnings stood at $27.13 million during the month. This is a 26.24% increase compared to the month of May of the corresponding year. However, earnings from apparel and textile exports declined by 14.55% year-on-year to $412.43 million in May 2023 compared to May 2022. Further, on a monthly analysis, export earnings of coconut-based kernel products, fiber products and shell products decreased by 3.7%, 9.59% and 4.23% respectively in May 2023 compared to May 2022. Earnings from coconut-based products decreased to $66.6 million by 5.57% in May 2023 compared to May 2022. For the period between January and May 2023, overall merchandise exports decreased by 8.29% to $4.83 billion compared to the corresponding period of 2022. Earnings from the export of tea increased by 13.69% to $522 million during the first 5 months of this year compared to the corresponding period of last year. Electrical and electronic components exports amounted to $210.7 million, which is 11.76% increase year-on-year. Export earnings from seafood, meanwhile, increased by 8.23% to $114.47 million during the period between January and May 2023 compared to last year. The United States continued to remain as Sri Lanka's single largest export destination. However, exports to the US decreased by 16.38% to $1.14 billion during the period between January and May 2023 compared to the corresponding period of last year. Exports to Italy and France have shown a positive performance between January and May this year, recording a growth of 6.29% and 0.8% respectively.
Let's take a look at how the rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. With that, we wrap up tonight's edition of First at 9. Have a good night.